Have you ever pulled out your credit card for something small and told yourself you will just pay it later? Maybe it was dinner with friends, a quick online purchase, or something you convinced yourself was completely necessary. In that moment, the transaction feels effortless because the money does not leave your bank account immediately. But here is the interesting part that most people never stop to think about. Every time you swipe that card, you are participating in a financial system designed by banks to be incredibly profitable. And whether you win or lose in that system depends almost entirely on how you use the card. Some people believe credit cards are dangerous financial traps that should be avoided completely. Other people treat credit cards like free money that magically pays for flights, hotels, and cashback rewards. But the truth sits somewhere right in the middle of those two extreme beliefs. Credit cards are not good, and they are not evil. They are simply financial tools that amplify whatever behavior you already have with money. If you already manage your money well, credit cards can quietly make your financial life easier. But if you struggle with spending discipline, credit cards can slowly destroy your financial stability. And the scary part is that most people never realize which side they are on until it is too late. Because credit card debt rarely appears overnight like a sudden financial disaster. Instead, it grows slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly in the background of your life. It begins with a few small purchases that seem completely harmless in the moment. Then maybe you carry a small balance one month because something unexpected happened. The following month, the balance is slightly larger because interest quietly appeared. And before you realize what is happening, the balance has turned into something difficult to escape. This is exactly how the credit card industry was designed to work. Banks are not hoping you never pay them, but they are also not hoping you become a perfect credit card user either. What they really want is something in the middle. They want you to keep using the card frequently, while occasionally carrying a balance, because that combination is where their profits become enormous. Let me explain why this system is so powerful. Every credit card transaction generates revenue in multiple ways. First, there are the interchange fees that businesses pay every time you swipe your card. Second, there are interest payments when someone carries a balance. Third, there are late fees and penalties when payments are missed. So even when you believe you are just buying groceries or ordering something online, a whole financial ecosystem is quietly earning money from that single swipe. But here is where things start to get really interesting. The banks already know something about human behavior that most people do not understand about themselves. When people use credit cards instead of cash, they tend to spend more money. Multiple studies have shown that consumers spend significantly more when using credit compared to physical cash. And the reason has nothing to do with intelligence or discipline. It has everything to do with psychology. When you pay with cash, you physically feel the loss of money leaving your hand. You watch the bills disappear, and your brain registers that loss immediately. But when you tap a credit card or click a button online, that sense of loss almost disappears. Your brain experiences the purchase, but not the immediate consequence. This small psychological difference might seem insignificant, but repeated over hundreds of purchases throughout the year, it creates a massive financial impact. A slightly larger purchase here, an extra item in the cart there, a few impulse purchases that feel harmless in the moment. All of these small decisions slowly compound into higher spending. And higher spending is exactly what the credit card industry depends on. But here is the part that most people misunderstand. The credit card companies are not actually trying to trap every customer in debt. In fact, some of their favorite customers are the ones who never pay interest at all. That might sound strange at first. Why would a bank like someone who never pays interest? The answer is surprisingly simple. Even if you never carry a balance, every purchase you make still generates fees for the bank. The merchant pays those fees, not you, which means the bank still earns money every time you swipe your card. So from the bank's perspective, the perfect customer is someone who spends frequently, pays on time, and keeps using the card forever. They earn transaction fees without dealing with missed payments or collections. This is where the entire game changes. Because once you understand how the system actually works, you can start using it in your favor instead of against yourself. Instead of becoming the person paying interest every month, You become the person collecting rewards, while the bank collects fees from merchants. Instead of financing purchases you cannot afford, you simply use the card as a temporary payment method. The key difference is not the card itself. The difference is the mindset you bring when using it. And that mindset shift is where smart credit card users separate themselves from everyone else. Because the smartest users follow a rule that sounds almost too simple to matter. Never spend money on a credit card that you do not already have in your bank account. It sounds obvious, but most people quietly break this rule all the time. They treat the credit limit like extra income. They convince themselves that future paychecks will solve the problem. And that is exactly where the trap begins. Because the moment a credit card becomes a borrowing tool instead of a payment tool, the entire math changes. And that is where interest enters the story. In the next part, we are going to break down exactly how credit card interest works. Because once you understand the mechanics behind it, you will realize why so many people stay stuck in credit card debt for years. Now let's talk about the part of credit cards that quietly traps millions of people every year. It is not the swipe itself that causes financial damage. The real problem begins the moment someone carries a balance past the due date. Because that is when credit card interest starts working against you instead of for you. Most credit cards charge interest rates somewhere between 18 and 28% annually. That number might not sound terrifying at first glance, but when you understand how that interest is calculated, the story becomes much more concerning. Credit card interest is usually calculated daily, not yearly. This means the bank is constantly updating how much you owe based on the balance sitting on your account. Every day that balance exists, a tiny piece of interest quietly gets added to the total. One day does not seem like a big deal, but weeks turn into months, and months slowly turn into years. And that is how small balances quietly grow into large financial burdens. Now, here is where things get even more deceptive. Most credit card statements show something called the minimum payment. At first glance, the minimum payment looks incredibly reasonable. Maybe your balance is $2,000 and the minimum payment is only $40. That feels manageable. In fact, it almost feels comforting because it suggests you are staying in control. But the minimum payment is not designed to help you escape debt quickly. It is designed to keep the balance alive for as long as possible. Because the longer that balance exists, the more interest the bank collects. Let's imagine someone has a $3,000 credit card balance with a 22% interest rate. If they only make the minimum payment every month, it could take more than 10 years to eliminate that balance. And over that time, they might pay thousands of dollars in interest alone, all for purchases that might have been groceries, clothes, or a few online orders. This is why credit card debt can feel like quicksand. You are making payments every month, yet the balance seems to shrink painfully slowly. But here is the twist that makes credit cards such a fascinating financial tool. All of that interest disappears if you pay your full balance every single month. The moment you pay the statement balance in full, the interest clock resets. Which means you can technically borrow the bank's money for a few weeks without paying a single dollar in interest. This is known as the grace period, and it is one of the most powerful features of credit cards if you understand how to use it. Imagine you buy groceries with your credit card on the first day of the month. Your statement might not close until the end of the month. Then you might have another 3 weeks before the payment is actually due. That means you could be using the bank's money for nearly 50 days without paying interest. Smart credit card users treat this window like a short-term payment tool. They make purchases they were already planning to make. Then they pay the entire balance before interest ever appears. When used this way, the credit card becomes something closer to a charge card. It simply helps manage cash flow while offering some extra benefits along the way. And those benefits are exactly what attract so many people to credit cards in the first place. Cashback rewards, travel points, airline miles, sign-up bonuses that promise hundreds of dollars in value. At first glance, it looks like the banks are giving away free money. You spend money and somehow earn rewards for doing it. But here is the part most people never stop to consider. Those rewards exist because the banks know something about average consumer behavior. Most people will eventually carry a balance. Most people will occasionally miss a payment. Most people will overspend slightly when using credit instead of cash. So while some disciplined users collect rewards and avoid interest completely, the average user ends up paying far more in interest than they ever receive in rewards. That is how the system stays profitable. It is a massive financial ecosystem built around human behavior. But disciplined users can flip the system completely. Instead of paying interest, they collect rewards. Instead of borrowing money, they simply delay payment for purchases they already planned to make. And over time, those small rewards start to accumulate. Cashback on groceries, points on travel, purchase protection on expensive items, fraud protection that protects their bank account from direct access. Used correctly, credit cards actually offer several advantages compared to debit cards or cash. But there is still one critical piece of the puzzle that many people overlook, and that is how credit cards affect your credit score. Your credit score is essentially a financial reputation score that lenders use to evaluate risk. It influences whether you qualify for loans, apartments, or even certain jobs. And credit cards play a surprisingly large role in how that score is calculated. Payment history is the most important factor. Paying your credit card bill on time every single month builds a positive record. But another factor called credit utilization also matters. This measures how much of your available credit you are currently using. If your credit card limit is $10,000 and your balance is $2,000, your utilization is 20%. Lower utilization generally signals responsible credit management. High utilization can signal financial stress. This is why responsible credit card users often keep their balances relatively low, even if they pay in full each month. Because the goal is not just avoiding interest. The goal is building a strong financial profile over time. And that strong profile eventually opens doors to better financial opportunities. Lower mortgage rates, better loan terms, higher credit limits, all of which quietly make your financial life easier in the long run. But even with all these benefits, credit cards still come with one dangerous temptation. And that temptation is reward chasing. Because once people start earning cash back or travel points, they sometimes convince themselves that spending more means earning more rewards. And that is exactly where the line between smart usage and financial trouble begins to blur. In the final part, we are going to talk about how disciplined users avoid these traps entirely, and why the real secret to using credit cards smart has nothing to do with rewards at all. So if credit cards can either destroy your finances or quietly benefit you, what actually separates the two outcomes? The answer is surprisingly simple. It is not intelligence, income, or even financial knowledge. The difference almost always comes down to behavior. Specifically, the difference comes down to whether someone treats a credit card like borrowed money or like a payment tool. Most people approach credit cards with what I call the borrowing mindset. They see a credit limit and interpret it as spending power. If the card says they have $5,000 available, their brain quietly translates that into money they can use. But that mental model is exactly what leads people into trouble, because a credit limit is not extra income. It is simply the maximum amount the bank is willing to lend you at very expensive interest rates. Disciplined credit card users operate with a completely different mental model. They follow something called the charge card mindset. Instead of seeing a credit card as a borrowing tool, they treat it like a temporary payment method. In their mind, every purchase is already paid for before the card is even swiped. The money already exists in their bank account. The credit card is simply acting as a middleman between the purchase and the payment. This small psychological shift changes everything, because it removes the possibility of carrying a balance in the first place. If the money is already there, the bill is simply a delayed transfer of cash that was already spent. And this is exactly how the most financially disciplined people use credit cards. They automate the system. They set their cards to automatically pay the full statement balance every month. They track spending so the card never exceeds what they already have available. And they treat the credit limit as irrelevant information. Over time, this behavior creates an interesting financial contrast between two people. Imagine two individuals with identical incomes, identical lifestyles, and identical credit cards. The first person carries a balance most months. They pay interest regularly and occasionally make minimum payments when money feels tight. The second person pays every statement in full. They never pay interest and quietly collect rewards on purchases they were already making. 5 years later, the difference between these two people can be enormous. The first person might have paid thousands of dollars in interest, money that disappeared into bank profits without creating any value in their life. The second person might have earned thousands in cash back or travel rewards, money that effectively reduced the cost of everyday spending. And the crazy part is that both people were using the exact same financial tool. The only difference was behavior. This is why credit cards are such a powerful example of financial leverage. They amplify your existing habits. If your spending is disciplined, they make things slightly better. If your spending is careless, they make things significantly worse. But here is the deeper lesson that goes far beyond credit cards. The real goal is not maximizing rewards, it is controlling your spending decisions. Rewards are simply a side benefit of responsible financial behavior. But when people focus too heavily on points or cash back, they sometimes start justifying purchases they never intended to make. They tell themselves they are earning rewards while quietly increasing their spending. And that completely defeats the purpose. Because earning 2% cash back on money you did not need to spend is not financial progress. It is simply spending slightly less inefficiently. This is why the smartest credit card users rarely talk about rewards as the main benefit. Instead, they focus on discipline and control. The card provides convenience. It offers fraud protection. It may generate some extra rewards over time. But none of those benefits matter if the spending itself is not intentional. And once you understand that principle, the entire credit card system becomes much easier to navigate. You stop worrying about maximizing points on every purchase. You stop chasing sign-up bonuses that require spending thousands of dollars. You simply use the card for purchases that already exist in your budget. The card becomes invisible. It quietly processes transactions in the background while your real focus stays on building wealth. And that is the real truth about credit cards. They are not financial enemies. They are not magical reward machines either. They are simply tools. Tools that can quietly support your financial life or slowly sabotage it, depending on how you use them. So the next time you pull out your credit card, remember that the swipe itself is not the problem. The real question is whether that purchase was already planned and already funded. Because if the money is already sitting in your bank account, the credit card is simply doing its job. But if the purchase depends on future income or future discipline, you are already stepping into the part of the system where banks make the most money. And the smartest financial move you can make is staying on the other side of that line.